Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Megan McNeal. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist. Years ago, I evaluated a young man who was running naked through the woods, believing he was Bigfoot, when he encountered a hunter. What are the odds, right? The hunter approached this young man while holding his rifle up, which scared this client who was in the throes of a manic episode related to his bipolar disorder. He believed the hunter was going to kill him because he was Bigfoot and then go back to his cave where the rest of his Bigfoot family lived and kill them as well. The hunter got close to my client and he disarmed this hunter, causing some physical damage. He dislocated his shoulder. He scuffed this hunter up quite a bit. And it was probably pretty emasculating for this hunter to be disarmed by a naked college student. Quick public service announcement. If you're in the woods and you encounter someone running naked and they seem delusional, perhaps you don't approach them with a gun. Maybe instead call emergency services. At any rate, this young man now has the gun. He has effectively disarmed this hunter, and then he feels bad for the hunter. So he returns the gun and helps this hunter up. This client is a pacifist at heart and didn't want to cause any damage to anyone else. So he helps this hunter up, at which point the hunter holds this young man at gunpoint, walks him out of the woods into a clearing where he gets cell phone service and calls 911. The police arrive. They take this young man into custody. He was charged with assault against this hunter. And this client took this case to trial using a self-defense argument, even though he could have used the insanity defense because he was clearly in the throes of psychosis and there was no substance use on board. The family decided they would go self-defense, in part because there's a stigma to having a mental illness, and many people would rather not have the stigma of a mental health diagnosis. During the trial, this client argued self-defense, that the hunter had approached him with a gun and he felt in fear for his safety and he disarmed this man. In closing, the prosecutor actually used the argument that this was not a self-defense case, but that this defendant's behavior was due to mental illness. The prosecutor was actually making the argument for guilty except for insanity. The jury did not have the option to choose guilty except for insanity. They only had, is he not guilty or is he guilty of the assault? The jury ultimately found this client guilty. They didn't agree with the self-defense argument because they believed it was more driven by a mental illness rather than a typical person defending themselves from a threat. This client was in prison for 5 years before the appeals court overturned his case and it went back to trial. At that point, the defense evaluator, who was me, and the state evaluator, a different forensic psychologist, both agreed that mental illness caused this client to engage in this particular behavior, and he was found guilty except for insanity. He is now being overseen by the state hospital system and will be discharged at some point in the near future. Another client I evaluated had the growing belief he was an angel and that he had the special ability to spot demons who were here on earth inhabiting other people's bodies. He became more and more convinced he was an agent of God and that his role was to rid the earth of these demons. One day he was walking past a store and a customer came out, and this client was convinced there was a demon inside this customer because of the way his eyes looked. So he pushed that person down and shouted for a while and did what onlookers described as yelling gibberish while waving his hands about. Later on, this client told me that he thought he was speaking the language of angels, and he was making signs from God to expel the demon from this person's body. After he did that for some time, he then walked away from the stranger, believing he had been successful in expelling the demon. Fortunately, he did not cause serious injury to this person. This client was completely sober. He had not used any substances. What triggered his psychosis was actually his antidepressant medication, because this young man had bipolar disorder that had been undiagnosed. It had not shown up yet. He'd never had a manic episode, but he had been feeling depressed for some time and took some antidepressant medication. And in some cases, antidepressants can trigger a bipolar mania. So a lot of people believe that bipolar disorder is basically these mood swings. And mood swings can certainly be part of bipolar disorder. One of the hallmark characteristics of bipolar disorder is when a person goes for many days without sleeping, or perhaps they get 1 or 2 hours of sleep each night or during the day. But for the most part, they're not sleeping, and it's not due to substance use. Many substances cause insomnia. A true bipolar episode is when there's no substance use on board and the person is not sleeping for many days and is pretty agitated and active, and perhaps having mood swings or feeling really grandiose, starting to have delusions, paranoid delusions, delusions of grandeur, that kind of thing. Because the charges were not very severe in this case, this particular client didn't cause much harm other than to scare that customer he had pushed over. He was accepted into mental health court, which allowed him to stay in the community and get various services such as individual or group counseling, medication management, help with housing and employment. If you like these videos and you would like me to keep uploading them, please hit like or subscribe. I have full videos on YouTube and training videos on Substack. Thanks for watching.